Good morning. Morning, Jim. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So, hello, everybody. This is Jim and Erica. So, I'm Erica Dent of Enjoy Discovering Wine, and Jim Gore. We've been working together for quite a few years now, having met at WSET School, London, worked together on the educator training program, worked together on the pilot courses for WSET, but particularly with the diploma course. And between us, we work with a lot of diploma students. And we've just got the wines left over from the exams from the D3 exam in October 2024. And Jim and I always discuss the wines, discuss the questions once we know what the questions are. And we just thought, well, why not have this discussion and just share it with you just to see, so you can see a little bit what goes on behind the scenes. So, Jim, yeah, we just thought we'd discuss the 12 wines from October, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll have a look at all 12 of them, but we'll focus on the first six to start with. And we won't go through sort of head to toe like our SAT or anything like that. But we'll just take you through our thought process about the wines that have been selected, and potentially if we were in this exam situation, how we would how we cope with these wines, how we would approach the tasting exam. So it's going to be a nice sort of conversation between us.
Okay. So we've got our first six wines poured. In front of us, we've got three reds for the first three wines, 1, 2, and 3, which we know is the same grape or dominant grape. And then we've got 4, 5, 6. 4 is a white wine, 5 and 6 are red wines. So something Jim said, what did you say to me? What would you do first? Because I'd be curious about this one. So I'm super, what's the word? Conscious of the fact that lots of students, and I've seen this when watching exams, people doing exams, will do the wines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if they get to this at number 4 and it's got sugar in it, then that's going to really, as we know, mess up the tannins on 5 and 6. So actually, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah. Just to check that it doesn't have any sugar, and this is completely dry. So in a way, it's not really going to upset the other wines effectively. But I think the general idea is that you tend to go for whites before reds. But as you said, if there's something about the white wine that will impact negatively or change your perception to the tannins or bitterness or astringency or that sort of thing, then yeah, you've got to be careful with it. So it's a real difficult one. So in your opinion, like would you go for wine 1, 2, and 3, which are reds? Do that first, or would you say, well, the second flight, the country flight, has got a dry white in it, and would you attack that flight first? What's your point of view?
I think something we discuss a lot, that sometimes the grape lineup could be more straightforward, could be more easy because you're thinking about grape, as opposed to the second lineup, which is country, which obviously, there's lots more things going through your mind. So something you said, Jim, is, so we've got the white wine for number 4. So we've got 5 and 6, 2 reds. We gave those a little sniff. And what was it you said about those 2 wines in particular, number 6?
Well, yeah, I would say number 6. I'm going to show you what these are in a second. But number 6 is really deep. It's got a lot of fruit. There's sort of a slight sort of spirity alcohol on the nose. I know that you can't necessarily smell body. That's a sensation, a combination of things on the palate. But you all will be used to doing blind tastings now. So when you look at number 6, it's a big, heavy red. You wouldn't know where it's from at this point, but it's something that you'll think, what, that's a kind of wine I probably want to be tasting at the end. It's not sort of a delicate one. And when we flip back to the first three wines, even looking at them, you know, it's, the light's not perfect in this room, but, you know, particularly with wine 2 and wine 3, I can definitely see through it pretty easily.
Yeah, pale.
Yeah, and taking sort of a generic sniff of the first wines, it's pretty red fruit dominant. There's sort of a floral lightness too. I wouldn't say intensity being light, but it's not a particularly sort of heavy, concentrated aroma.
It's got that delicate red fruit, that kind of floral notes, rather than a big sort of powerful, jammy, spicy, spirity style of red wine. So our clues here are: we've got pale whites, certainly 2 and 3, and we've got lots of vibrant red fruit with the violety kind of floral notes that obviously get rid of quite a lot of grape varieties than our Shiraz Cabernet kind of fruit.
Yeah.
And so based on that, we've got 3 more delicate red wines, for want of a better word, like you said, versus number 6, we think is going to be a bruiser.
Yeah. So in a strange way, we're going to be doing this in a traditional order and going for wine 1, 2, and 3, doing the grape first. But it's a strange way because we know we're not going to be tackling the white in the lineup first. And you know, you can do this in whichever way you want and whichever way you're comfortable. A lot of students just prefer to do wine 1, 2, and 3 because that's the way they do it. But you just have to be careful that you're not going to be messing up your calibration. Water in between the wines and then nice little portions can really help us.
Yeah, we get a little bit froze on you there, but we could still hear your words. Water in between the wines helps. Okay, so shall we switch off the recording and have a little taste of the wines, and then and we can come back and show what they are and give us a bit more of our thoughts. Okay, so Jim and I have just tasted the first 3 wines and just talked through it as if we would maybe consider if we were having to do the exam again. As we said before, we looked at the wines, pale, red fruit flavours. We decided to taste the second one first, which was a bit more about primary, just fresh fruit flavours there. All of the wines had some refreshing acidity, certainly no lower end of acidity in these wines. And then we went to 1 and 3 because they felt a little bit heavier, a bit riper fruit, a bit more spicy, a bit more oak apparent there. So we tasted all 3 of those wines there. We tried not to work out what the grape was because our recommendation always is try and just write your note and then step back from the 3 to try and, you know, analyze what it is. And what did we think could go wrong with these 3 wines? Jim, do we want to share them first, or?
So let me just put that up so you can see. So wine number 1, 2, and 3, they're all Pinot Noir. So you'll see we've got 1 from New Zealand, 1 from Germany, and then 1 from the US. And we, as Erica said, we tried number 2 first because it just seemed the most delicate on the nose. But actually, you know, looking at all of them, I don't think it would matter massively which order you tasted these in because, you know, it's not sort of danger time trying 1 or 3 first. But we went for number 2. But what was quite interesting is when you got to number 3, however you approach that, something about that wine, that this sort of slightly jammy, vanilla, coconut, I think you said sort of glacier cherries was on your note, Erica, slightly lower acidity than the first 2. With your sort of muscle memory, you might taste number 3 and say, wow, that really reminds me of a Californian wine. And you may incorrectly use that one sample and say, that means it must be a Zinfandel or a Cabernet Sauvignon or something. So I think more so than anything else, wine number 3 is pushing more towards the place rather than the grape variety. So what you need to do with this is to take a step back once you've written your notes and to say, overall, what is the evidence pointing towards? And here we're looking at pretty high acidity, tannins on the lower end, and lots of red fruit throughout all of them. So therefore, we're thinking more about Pinot Noir than a Grenache or a Zinfandel, because Grenache and Zinfandel, certainly the acidities over all of the samples would be much more on the lower end in general. And also, Erica, you were saying if number 3 was a Zinfandel, what would be different about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the key here is, and it's always wonderful to see the information, but for the Zinfandel from California, and the wine we agreed was a higher quality wine, would have higher alcohol on that one there. And with these wines, the alcohol, nicely selected, WSET exams team, the alcohol is nicely integrated, harmonious in all of the wines there. So that was the biggie for me. Obviously more of the black fruit with the Zinfandel there. And as you said, these are more refreshing wines, even though we've got that real ripeness of flavour on the third wine.
But isn't it interesting, you're looking at the alcohol for all of these 3, 13.5, 13.5, 13.5, going from Germany to the US. Yeah. And that is a really interesting bit of information that you think you potentially could use alcohol really strongly and to be able to point out where they come from. But, Germany's becoming warmer. They're doing everything they can in the US to sort of slow down the ripening of things like Pinot Noirs. So it's it's tricky. I don't think alcohol is going to help as much as it normally would, other than potentially, as you said, discounting something like Grenache or Pinot Noir overall. So
absolutely.
So relatively pale in color. Red fruit dominant. There's oak in some of the wines, which happens with Pinot Noir. Tannins on the lower end, acidity on the higher end. Relatively high quality wines going right the way through, and nothing from Burgundy. Isn't that interesting?
That's the really interesting bit, isn't it? So if you're trying to make a grape fit a famous region, if you're saying to yourself, well, is there something, not that you'd have to say Burgundy necessarily, it depends what the WSET put in the paper, but yeah, it's a case of like, don't try and make it fit. Well, none of these are Burgundian, like, therefore it can't be Pinot Noir. Stick with what the evidence you've got in the glass. As Jim said, the colour intensity, the fruit flavours, some oak, and where we've got a little bit of age showing, it's coming through as that sort of gamey, mushroomy character. For me, the first wine really showed the cloves, and I get cloves a lot with Pinot Noir, with the oak, particularly on New Zealand wines. So it's just those kind of little clues that could stop you straying there. But overall, we think, despite no Burgundy, a really nice set of Pinot Noirs to work with.
And I think, truthfully, from my perspective, I think wine number 1, even though you were saying, you were getting a New Zealand vibe from the wine, yeah. I think I could comfortably get to a New World Pinot Noir from that. But I would be, if they were asking like a little question, what identify the region or country, I think I might struggle to say it definitely is New Zealand instead of, Australia or Chile or something like that. But at least getting outside of Europe because of that ripeness of fruit, I think that would be, a safe bet. Wine number 2, I think you could get to Europe, but whether it's, a more simple Burgundy or from Alsace or Germany, I think there might be a bit of luck there if they're expecting you to get to that. It's just pure, lots of red fruit, the red currant, the sort of slightly sour raspberry or cherry note. I think that's definitely pushing to a more cooler climate, more delicacy that you find with European Pinots. But I think wine number 3, I think that is directly linking to California. I don't think you're really getting Pinot Noirs like that from anywhere else. Nothing in South America, nothing in Australasia, South Africa. You just don't get that sort of coconut, almost sort of like spicy note. I was saying in the break, and this is probably what I wouldn't necessarily write down on the exam paper, but a lot of Californian wines sort of have this almost sort of slightly sort of Coca-Cola spice note. Some people say sort of root beer aroma coming through, and I think you only really get that with US wines, certainly in an exam situation. So yeah, I agree. I think really well selected wines, and they made Pinot Noir a little bit harder by not having a Burgundy in there.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Okay, so Eric and I have tried the next 3 wines, so 4, 5, and 6. So just to remind you, 4, 5, and 6 are always going to be from the same country. So we'll show you what they are in a second, but the temptation when you're doing this flight is to try and jump to the country first, to like spot the banker and say, okay, I'm definitely in this particular place. But it's useful just to have a look at the wines, get a general impression of them, and then hopefully let that banker or the wines with more specific aromas that can help you, just let it sort of show itself to you. So with the first wine number 4, it's a very neutral white wine. It smells of every type of apple going: green, yellow, red, pear. What do you smell and taste, Erica, on the white?
Yeah, it's that lovely, like you say, the green fruit, green apple, pears, bit of citrus in them. To blossom, all the great words: lemon, blossom, apple. It's fresh, refreshing, even on the palate. Dry, refreshing. So you got your acidity in there, but it's primary. It's all about primary, and it's, even though we could say, ooh, that could be many wines from many places, actually, when we come on to the other wines, it's what is it not? It's not, like you said, Jim, it's not big oaky something or other. Yeah. It's not sweet. It's not a low acid or low acid Gewürz or Viognier or something like that. So you could discount. But at this stage in the game, I'd just be really happy that I've got a refreshing white wine. Change my palate when we get to the next 2.
Yeah. And it's
WSET.
And it's fresh, it's fruity, but it's not so bold. A lot of New World whites would have, not to say more character, but just more of a ripeness in them. Whereas there's a subtlety, there's a delicacy to this wine. As you said, no secondary just sort of note coming through with it. So if you can get that it's a dry, relatively high acid, neutral European white, then that's great. Thank it for its tasting note and its quality and bottle age. But yeah, let's try and place it a little bit later. So we've done it, but let's forget about it.
Yes.
So the second wine, I suppose the conversation of which wine would you try out of these 2? You probably can't quite see the appearance.
Yeah, you can see that your second one is much paler there than the.
Yeah.
So number 5 is a pale. Well, it is actually a pale red, whereas you've got deep on the next one.
So I probably would go for number 5 first. So the second one. So it's really pale, and it's fragrant. And actually, even though these have been rebottled, it's been opening up for the last 15-20 minutes for me.
It has.
What do you smell? What's your sort of overall impression of this?
On the nose, this is something that I wouldn't necessarily jump to where am I on the nose, because it's red throat. It's beautifully defined red throat, but there's spice and there's floral going on in there and some other things. It's complex. There's lots going on. But that could take you in lots of different country directions. Is when I got on to tasting it. It was like, okay.
Yeah. So I think I agree. I think a real sort of mix of red fruit dominant primary, plenty of secondary, sort of smoky, and then some tertiary. But that isn't necessarily pointing you to any particular place, any particular variety. But on the palate, what did it give to you?
Right, everybody, drink lots of what I think. Obviously, we were lucky we knew what they were. Drink of Nebbiolo. This is a banker because it's got that real Nebbiolo, high acid, loads of tannin, but fine, lovely tannin, ripe tannin. It's just so specific. Whereas on the nose, you think Pinot Noir, Corvina, you could be, as we said with the Pinot Noirs, it could be many different ones. You go back and smell it. But when you taste it, those tannins, unmistakable to me, anyway, having tasted quite a lot of Nebbiolo, unmistakable Nebbiolo tannins.
Yeah. And I think it's the combination of red fruit dominant, pale in colour, and as you said, those tannins right at that top end. And even though we're saying you're in the right spectrum, anything like sort of firm or fine grain, there's a real sort of bite to these tannins. There's more polymerization to happen in the bottle for sure with these. And I can't really think, other than Zinamavro, I can't think of a pale red wine of this sort of quality that has that level of tannin. Yes, for acid, Pinot Noir can have that and others, but there's nothing really in combination.
Particularly in the WSET range on the specification, or the grapes we look at, the wines we look at. Yeah, Zinamavro is a good shout.
Yeah. Okay, so we've established that this is a Nebbiolo, so we're effectively saying that we're in Italy, and this is a really natural thing to happen, because you'd be saying a neutral white wine at the start, and then you get to the Nebbiolo and you say, now I'm in Italy, and then suddenly you think, oh, well, of course, the first wine makes complete sense. It's a dry, relatively high acid, unoaked, neutral white wine, which can exist in any sort of form, from Gavi to Soave to anything, even in sort of central Italy, Radicchio or whatever. But can you see how important it is that we didn't say, neutral white wine, that reminds me of Albarino, we must be in Spain. Oh, a neutral white wine, that reminds me of Bruno, we must be in Austria or wherever.
Dangerous game with a neutral white wine. Yeah. So if we're going Italy, then we went to our next one, which is deep, it's powerful, it's really, really is big, intense wine, spicy, meaty, big wine. Do you get big wines like this in Italy? Absolutely. So when you put all three together, all three of them are quite nice to write notes on. They're all dry, you get your marks there. You've got in this one, the body, the alcohol, etc. And what I found was when I was sniffing it, I was like, oh, a bit of this, a bit of that. And I went back to the number 2 and it was like, okay, very pure, well-defined red fruit characters. So even if I couldn't nail where this was from, I'd still be happy because of the high acidity and the high alcohol. I'd still be happy. And when we're saying this, I'm saying high alcohol. It felt higher. It isn't high alcohol. But I'd still be happy that I was in a country that could do this diversity.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right on the nose. I think that might be slightly difficult to work out exactly where this comes from. My two sort of immediate impressions would be, are we looking at something like an Amarone, or are we looking at something from right down in the south? It doesn't have that sort of, the delicacy you might get with Sangiovese or Montepulciano. or even Barbera or anything like that. So I think it's going to be on the palate that will.
Yeah.
I know you won't be trying this particular wine, but it's really, really chewy.
Yeah.
These tannins are. Yeah, it's a wine from 2018, and it's end of 2024 now, and the tannins have still got a lot of polymerization to do. And you're more the Amarone expert than me, but my impression is that if it was an Amarone with those dried grapes, that even though the tannins could be towards the top, there'd be more of a softness to it.
Absolutely. These are firmer, more grippy. My experience of Amarone, I'm very lucky to be able to try that quite a lot. Yeah, it's softer, riper tannins. And also, I just think with Amarone, even though we've got some dried fruit in here, from the aging, the fruit is more about the drying characteristics that you get through that dried fruit characteristic. Yeah, so I think I'm going to pause the recording because Jim has frozen, but I think we've got to Italy. Okay, are you ready?
I've already pressed go. Here we are. So.
Oh, yes.
Hello, unfrozen, back again.
Unfrozen, Jim's back.
So, yes, we're in Italy. High tannins, lots of black fruit. An interesting point that it's only 13.5% alcohol rather than high. But to be honest, I think it's coming across as pretty high, the alcohol. So I just share what we're looking at. So we have a Gavi for one number 4, Barolo for number 5, and then we have an Aglianico for number 6. Okay.
Well done, WSET team.
Yeah.
Thank you for those.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Right. Well, you can see on the slide here what we're going to be looking at anyway. So it's the Languedoc for the next 3. So this is, excuse me, the first time that they've put Languedoc as a region in there. So what we'll do is we'll have a try of these wines, and we will take you through our sort of our view of how you could get to this particular place. So this is the first for us as educators, seeing this as this for you. Okay.
Interesting.
Right, well, please, then we'll see you in a sec.
So we're back. We're now looking at the 3 wines that you saw on the screen before. So Languedoc region. In my opinion, a tricky one, but once Jim and I discussed it, we worked out how you could get to the Languedoc. So we're going to taste these wines now and then come back to you and tell us what our discussion entailed. Okay,
so we are back. My internet seems like it's better now. So
yes.
That's a good thing. So last time, or just before, we revealed that we're looking at the Languedoc as the region, and as we said, it's the first time that this has come up. So we've had a try of these 3 wines as a rosé, Picpoul de Pinet, and then a Fitu as the final one. So we have had a little taste of these, Erica and I, and Erica, your first sort of impression, do you think it's a good idea to go for the rosé or for the white first? What would your view be?
Okay, so my first thing, so we've got the rosé, the white, the red. The reds I'm definitely going to put to one side for now, but what I'm going to do is my little, because if I look at those wines, and I did that thing of like, region, which I'm trying not to do at this stage because I just want to write good notes. I can look at those wines going, if there's sweetness in those wines, that might give me more clue. Not just your Loire or outside of Europe, but even Portugal could be, a clue there. So I think knowing if these have got sugar in them would be not only useful for what order I taste them in, because if they both have sugar, I'll start with the red, but also taking my mind away from certain wines, such as the Loire, for example. But when I get to it, whether it's the rosé or the white, to me, I haven't got a preference on what order to taste. No.
No, I agree. And I think to me, it would probably just be, what's your curiosity? Which one do you want to work out first? Just having a sniff of both of them, neither of them, the rosé or the white, are revealing very much. If you're doing this blind, like they're both fairly plain on the nose. So I don't think that's necessarily going to help so much. But knowing that we've got two dry wines, and knowing that it's a region, and each wine selected for this section has to be characteristic or typical of the region. So they're not just going to put a random rosé in from a place that happens to produce a rosé. It will have to be, a traditional, well-known rosé. So I think I'd be a little bit more curious as to what's going on with the pink. So I think that's just where my head would go.
Yeah. Again, and the way mine works is it narrows it down more. But having just had, like you say, sniff of that, a fresh wine, as you said, similar to when we had the Gave on the Italian lineup with the wine number 4, that is going to be a harder one to narrow down. I'm not saying this is easy to narrow down, but yeah, we've got, with regards to WSET's remit on what rosés they would show, that one might start us thinking. So, and like you said, we have tasted it, and it's a simple wine. So what we were also saying with this lineup was, actually sometimes that's nicer and easier to write a tasting note on. So what you need to do with these wines is get a really good tasting note in, and there's some pretty obvious marks with the color, the intensity, the sweetness. It's dry, the simplicity of the wine, using those kind of words like generic, simple, and everything. Get lots and lots and lots of marks that are going to really help you with your quality conclusion, to get lots of marks on the quality conclusion. And sometimes I think students, I know, certainly at level 2, level 3, the more simple wines seem more tricky because we want to make them more. But if you just go in with that, right, taste it, it is a simple wine. Boom, that's my aging potential sorted. That's my quality conclusion sorted. So that would also give me confidence, not just if I kind of put the region aside, to say, right, I've got some good marks here in this wine.
Yeah. And if we have a little taste of it, one thing I think that is really key for this is that we don't have a high level of acidity here. Okay, I'm not saying it's low, but it's not a high level of acidity. And when you're looking at the regions where typical rosés could come up, one of the first places you should be thinking about is the Loire. So, Sancerre rosé, rosé de Loire, they're both dry, but also rosé d'Anjou, Cabernet d'Anjou, they're much sweeter. But, there are 4 different rosés there. And I think, that would definitely be one place that my head is sort of going to. But when you try this wine, you'll notice that the acidity, it's present, it's in balance, but it's not right up there at the high level. So just on that, the examiners are probably trying to show us or lead us down the path that maybe this is a rosé that's coming from a warmer place. That said, when you get down to the Southern Rhone with Tavel or Navarra rosé, Navarra obviously being in Spain, those are much deeper rosés. So when you're looking at this, you might say, okay, that's not quite working just in terms of the color. So effectively where you're landing is Provence rosé, basically, or a rosé from the Languedoc, from southern France. We can discount white Zinfandel because we know that it's dry. So there aren't too many dry, pale rosés out there that have relatively, medium or lower acid. So it's a strange one, but we're sort of getting to southern France or Provence style rosé based on appearance and based on the lower level of acidity. It's not really about the fact that, does it smell of strawberries? Does it smell of peaches? Does it smell of raspberries? That sort of part is can be different for lots of different rosés. So it's more the structure, I think, that will help, and the fact that it's dry, that will help. So,
absolutely. But even if you thought, let's say, for example, I know a lot of people might taste that wine because there's not a lot of fruit in it, and the fruit is sort of a bit unripe, so it might give a sourness of fruit to it. People got confused thinking the acidity was higher than it was. Going to the third wine without even tasting it, if we said we wanted to taste the white first, just smelling that wine, smell the alcohol, smells spirity, smells jammy and baked, particularly the baked fruit there. So if I was kind of thinking I'm in the south of France, but maybe I did think the acidity was more because it's refreshing and quite light intensity, and then I smelt that, then that would take me away from the Loire with that wine there and confirm my thoughts. So even though this feels like more of a banker, this is really, really helpful.
Yeah. And I think with these wines, it's some of them can give you a lot of information just with the SAT, but some of them can give you more information when they're placed in combination with another wine in the flight. So this is why, unless it's one wine that's really speaking to you, like the Barolo in the last flight, it's often better to sniff, taste, take a step back, and then make sure that you're using all of the samples to help you get to a place. Because, as you said, with the first wine, you quite easily, if you misjudge the acidity, say, yeah, it's a Sancerre Rosé or something. And then you'd be then thinking, okay, there must be a 15% Cabernet Franc from Chinon that I've never had before, but it's here in this exam. That's the way your head would spin you. So it's important.
And we've heard students many a time, and it's exam pressure, where they find a wine and they're convinced it's something, so they make the other wines fit where they want to take that first wine. So sometimes the banker is just the banker, like the Nebbiolo, but sometimes, don't sort of, even if you came to the red and went, oh, I'm not sure, but I'm really sure about that one, don't, be open to moving away from your initial thought.
Yeah. And we know what it's like if we're stressed or tired or anything like that, we know that we don't taste exactly the way that we should do. So in an exam situation, it's sometimes a little bit hard to trust yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So with the white wine, the Picpoul, what was your sort of impression? I think you were pointing it and saying this isn't helping.
It isn't helping if I hadn't have done those bits there, because it's fresh fruit. It's fresh fruit, tasting it's dry, it's refreshing. Like the first white we have, no secondary, no tertiary, it's for drinking up young and fresh. So again, that's all my notes. Dry, boom, light body, etc. But if we've decided to go south of France, ta-da! What's a common wine that we learn at level 3 even? This is something we say to our students a lot. If it's on level 3, it's considered very important. So those two helped. If I'd started with wine number 1 and tried to make wine number 2, if I tried to make that fit somewhere, I'd be stressed.
And can you see how easy it would be to convince yourself that the first one is a Sancerre Rosé and the second one, you were like, okay, clearly we're in the Loire, and you're okay, it's not a Chenin, it doesn't, quite have the intensity of the apple character, it doesn't feel like a Sauvignon Blanc, oh, it must be a Muscadet. And then once you've got 2 that you're happy is in a certain place, you would put that third close to 15% wine as a Cabernet Franc and just make it fit. So really love the samples they've chosen for this exam, because these two neutral European whites, we're doing the same thing with both of them. We're saying, thank you very much for the SAT, quality, we've got that, bottle age. I can probably write this pretty quickly and save some time for some more tricky wines. Excuse me. But I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to bring it into my analysis once I've looked at the other wines. So
yeah. So even though you won't be able to stop your brain trying to go somewhere, what you're saying is be happy, get your style notes down, and even when you start writing a tasting note for another dry wine, 1 month, you know, you can feel the alcohol on this, so you're getting your mark for your high alcohol and the baked fruit, etc. So there's lots of easier marks in there to build your confidence. And like you say, so focus on the tasting notes and then kind of deep breaths, right, let's come back to it, and then look at what we've got.
Yeah.
Don't be guided by maybe what you were thinking earlier. Step back from, look at your tasting notes. Yeah.
And I think this third wine, wine number 9, I think this is really where it's showing the climate of the Languedoc. You know, the other two, you know, rosé slash the Picpoul, you know, either higher altitude, or they're picking it earlier, or slightly higher yield, anything to kind of keep that sugar level down. Whereas I think the final wine, quite right, I'm really glad they've gone for this sort of higher alcohol one. It's showing the climate. But I would say on the nose, I think this is quite tricky. You know, there's lots of black fruit, but also I am getting this sort of smoky bacon tertiary note, which we know we get from Syrah, and spiciness from Grenache and Ved and that sort of thing. But I honestly think if I was just smelling that independently, my head may also go to South Africa in terms of a pinotage. But I think that South African reds and Southern French reds, I think they can have a lot in common. So I think the nose might be a little bit tough if you're trying to absolutely nail down what a variety is within this. What do you think on the palate for this? Any help?
Any help? Yeah, certainly that alcohol, the intensity of the baked nature, some black pepper, some herbs. If I get a black peppery character, I look for those dried herbs. So that kind of puts me in certain areas there. It's a good example of what we know it is. We luckily know what it is, but I think it's a good example of demonstrating.
And I think the tannin nature as well is important here, because I think that's also another indication of the climate, because they're soft, they're smooth, they're polymerized. So, you know, that's even more information taking you away from the Loire, where hopefully they'd be picking, you know, a Cabernet Franc based wine that, you know, has a little bit more astringency or greenness coming through, as there's no greenness to this at all.
No, exactly. And let's maybe even assume there's some Carignan in there, which would need a good ripening to avoid that unripeness. So yeah. So I think take homes for this is one of the wines is helping with the climate. I think that's the third wine. The first wine is really testing your quite basic knowledge of rosé. You really don't need to go beyond level 3 to sort of funnel down into which areas have rosés like this. And I think the Picpoul is basically testing your examination technique, that you're not letting it rule your thought process. So even though it's a very difficult or first time, let's say, that this is coming up, I think good on them. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And even though I would have thought, I want that first one to be a Provence rosé, how's that going to fit in? Actually, as you said, you can get some dry pale rosés from down there. Why wouldn't you, make those down there? So,
And when you look back at the paper and you're looking at the fairness of the paper, Pinot Noir is a great variety. It's not Merlot. It's not like it's one of the ones I think that might be slightly easier. You've then got Italy with a Barolo in there to get to Italy. So I don't think it's so far, it's the worst paper in the world in terms of difficulty. So I think it is almost like a fair enough putting in something a little bit different here.
Okay, so maybe they put some tricky ones in the unnamed and mixed bag, as I like to call them at the end. So shall we have a little taste of those and come back and
let's do that.
have our comment? So our final 3 wines, which are the 3 wines that have no connection. They are unidentified by grape or region or anything. So it's nice because you're not going to be going through that agony of I've got to make this fit a region or a country. So you can just step away and take each individually. And we showed you the wines briefly. You may have seen them pop up, but we'll tell you what they are as we go through. But again, the same thing. Do we need to stick our fingers in these 3 white wines, Jim? Works for me. First wine, no sugar. Third wine, no sugar. I'm a little bit wary of sticking my finger in this one, but I'm going to do it anyway. Bags of sugar. Okay, so I'm going to have a swig of water. Let's get rid of that sugary taste. So now I know definitely leave that wine till last and probably enjoy it really a lot. So then we've got the 2 whites, and I'm going to use them to do this as a comparison because I always find it's easier to have a couple of wines, and I've still got my kind of fairly neutral white from the first lineup. But I don't know about you, but when I smelt that first wine, green bell pepper, absolutely smacking me in the face. And if you don't smell green pepper, bell pepper, you'd get asparagus or nettle or peas or something like that in here. I mean, they've picked this beautifully, haven't they? Because, well, my thought would be Sauvignon Blanc. And, you know, you can get Sauvignon Blancs that have less of that herbaceous dominance, more towards the passion fruit. But if we get a lot of that nettle asparagus, then we're taking down the Sauvignon route. And thank you very much, exams team, because that has taken me down the Sauvignon route immediately.
Yeah. I mean, it feels to me like it's more Sauvignon Blanc than the typical Sauvignon Blancs. You know, if you had all of the Sancerres and Puy Fumés in the world next to this one, it was like, oh, this is more typical of the grape, which, you know, is maybe a silly way to think of it, but it's
Did you see that? I just swelled it and threw it all down me.
Oh, I've been doing that constantly, but it's
yeah, lovely one. So if I then number 12 does cause me slight concern in my own like need to figure it out, because this is not neutral, it's powerful, but it's unusual. It's kind of
I think I would end up spending not double the time on this one, but I'd be really happy that I did that Sauvignon Blanc number 10 quite quickly, because I think I do need, what we said in the break, we would need more time to sort of reason what this is, because they could ask grape, they could ask country, they could ask region, they could ask winemaking, but it's a tough one, you know, neutral / powerful.
Yeah. Interesting, because it's got other stuff like a waxiness and things like that. So absolutely agree. I'd start off, build my confidence up with what I think is a Sauvignon, get those marks from all those herbaceous notes, but not forgetting, especially I have a lot of students, level 2, level 3, who go, I just can't get past that green bell pepper. So it's just telling yourself, well, there will be fruit in there. Find the fruit, whether that's through sniffing or through tasting and warming it up and bringing out the fruit. But that might be something I might fall down and go, oh, I forgot to write about the fruit, which I think you would need to have some of that citrus in there and green fruit to get your marks. But it's classic, isn't it? Dry, high acid, get those marks. But potentially, could they ask us where it's from, or would they just?
They could, yeah. I mean, you could be asked, you know, identify the country, identify the region, or they could say, you know, give reasons for this. But I mean, it's asking about the grape variety and giving reasons, that's the main point. But if you were maybe in another part of the exam, if you were asked to work out where this Sauvignon Blanc came from, the alcohol being 14%, that's a deliberate push to push us away from Europe, to say, well, it's 14%, that's generally, would push us away. With a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, much more of the passion fruit note probably would be evident, and we're not finding that there. With a Sauvignon Blanc from the US, I would either expect a bit more texture or maybe some oak, or at least the fruit going more towards the tropical. So I think it would only be South Africa or maybe Chile, which would have that combination of the pea, nettle notes, real sort of influence from the coast, but high sunshine strength, which would then lead to 14% alcohol. So I think it would, it'd be absolutely valid saying Sauvignon Blanc from South Africa or from Chile.
Okay, yeah, linking it to the warmth.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're banking on the fact that it's quite obvious Sauvignon. Thank you very much, team. Let's say why we think it's a Sauvignon. Varietal characteristics. So we need to finish on the sweet wine, as we know. So we discussed this quite a bit when we switched off the recording to see where we would go with this. Because there are a lot of things you can discount, aren't there, Jim? But this is about a great variety, as Jim said, potentially smells like it could be neutral, but then you get into it and it's got development and waxy and nutty and all sorts of things going on, but you have to really kind of get into it. I don't know if it's a bad WSET way of putting it, but it's not shouty. It's pronounced in a really defined way.
Yeah. And I think no doubt when the students were trying this, they smelt it, tasted it, and were maybe even getting more confused about it as they were going along, which is normally the opposite. It normally starts to speak to you a little bit more. But if you got to that finish and you said, this is long, this is a high quality wine, then that makes it a little bit easier, because if you just say, okay, a high quality Sauvignon Blanc would be nothing like this. A high quality Riesling, you'd be having more of a petrol-y or sort of note. A high quality Chardonnay would speak so much more potentially to secondary notes that are coming through. A high quality Gruner Veltliner, which was one of our sort of original considerations for this one, they would hopefully be showing a bit more of that peppery sort of spice.
Yeah.
You then think about a high quality Hunter Valley Semillon, which has very similar sort of waxy notes. But if you think about Tyrrell's high quality Hunter Valley Semillon, you're looking at sort of 9.5%, 10% alcohol. This is 13.5%.
Yeah.
So if you can get that warmth, and as high quality and integrated as that alcohol is, it's not 9/10% alcohol. Yeah. It's not like body. So if you can try and wrestle with that, you may be able to push Hunter Valley Semillon, I'm not going to say away, but maybe just to the second rung of the ladder. Yeah. And where we landed was Sauvignon, which is what it is, versus something like a Sylvaner, high quality Sylvaner. Both are tough wines. I'm sure some of you who are looking at this going, oh, I've not really had the high quality Sauvignon or Sylvaner maybe once in your class. Yeah. But both are dry, both are pretty high acid, both can have secondary notes, particularly with lees. Both have wonderful tertiary, earthy, waxy notes and nutty notes.
You like them, yeah?
I do. And with this sample, I think some people may have got this. I'm not picking up massively in this, but maybe more sort of chamomile and honey notes you might associate more with Chenin Blanc as a variety in terms of its tertiary character. But today, honestly, on the nose, I think I'd be searching for that. I don't think, I wish I could smell it.
knowing, because I don't smell chamomile, as we know, knowing what it is, the more I smell it now, I do get a little bit of that wet wool thing going on.
Right.
But I know what it is. But you know, it's there, and that wet wool from your Shannon.
Mhm.
I could pick that up, that would probably help me. But just to go back, so we didn't miss it, your comment there where you were talking about focusing on the finish, because these wines that are a bit more tricky, rather than agonize over what flavors am I getting, where's it from, one of the things we say actually to all of our students at all levels for all wine tasting from the beginning, think about the finish, because if a wine's going to confuse you, well, maybe focus on quality. Okay, it's not going to necessarily narrow it down. As you said here, the wines we've said, Silvana, Hunter Valley, Semillon, maybe Gruner, they can have long finishes and be very good outstanding quality as well. But it might help in another situation, or it'll just give you that extra mark. I can still taste this wine, and we've been chatting.
Yeah, and it's just important to think about the quality and the variety or the region at the same time, because that can sort of reveal a few things. But honestly, I think the way I would approach this is to say, if we were asked about variety, I'm considering Chenin and Silvana because both can produce dry, high acid, neutral but quite interesting tertiary characters, you know, that sort of waxiness maybe to come through. And maybe if you are tempted to start to write wet wool, you might go, okay, maybe that's leaning more towards Chenin Blanc. But yeah, I think you have to come down with one variety at the end if they ask for it. But there's no harm in considering a couple.
Yeah. So you could say, I think it might be Silvana, or it could be a Sauvignon. So Chenin, because, but I am going to favour Sauvignon, and then you're hoping that it is, but you're still going to get recognition for.
Yeah, as long as the examiner can see what's in your head, and it's true and it's a reasonable point, then yeah. But you're not going to win them all, and it's, you know, there are 12 wines to do well on, and for this one, the SAT should be pretty straightforward in quality and bottle age, but actually just that final analysis question or questions, they are tricky for this. Yeah.
That's why it's worth having your diploma.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, you might get a little bit frustrated with some of these sort of difficult wines, but you know, you've got the diploma, you're like, I did that difficult exam.
Exactly.
Okay, so
then we just enjoy this at the end, yeah.
And you know, we don't have the exact exam papers. We're not allowed to look at the questions or anything. But this is a sort of wine that sometimes they don't necessarily ask about what is the region. They may just ask about winemaking for it. And
did they ask about growing natural factors as well for something like this? Because stick your nose in detritus.
Yeah, and the thing is with the production side of the question for the tasting, it starts at harvest and then ends at bottling there and sort of maturation. So they can't ask you anything about how the grapes were grown, but in the guidance document, they have a sentence, I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think it's there is evidence that the grapes have been there's hand harvest of botrytized grapes because sugar, flavor, acidity, etc. So without a doubt, you can get to botrytis with this.
So even though it kind of says you can't talk about that bit, you can, because it's what you're harvesting.
Yeah, exactly. So you're starting at harvest. So anything about the ripeness of the grapes at harvest or anything to do with those grapes at harvest, yeah, that's where you can start from. And I mean, what's your evidence that we've got hand harvested botrytized grapes?
Because the botrytis is so powerful, so clear, so strong. And again, everybody, if you've only had a botrytis wine when you do level 2, level 3, level 4 classes, you know, get these again, because once you get to know that smell, there's no smelling that and remembering that smell. Saffron, rye bread, marmalade, all those characteristics.
Yeah. And when you just have those super late harvest wines that, have really ripe fruit, there's a lot of sweetness on the palate. The fruit is often in like a canned or tinned or slightly confected or jammy sort of sense, but you don't get that sort of saffron, rye bread, mushroomy sort of note. That's a real rotten character.
Yeah.
And you get that from that.
And again, it's one of those ones, and we'll come on to if they wanted more specifics of what it is. It's still lots of marks. So say to yourself, right, I'm going to get lots of marks. I write sweet. I write pronounced. I write full body. And in this situation, I'm going to write long finish. And those flavors, there's lots and lots and lots of easy marks, relatively easy to maybe, some of the other wines.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We know it's botrytis, and you think that they'll probably ask a question on the wine and the production. Okay, should people agonize over whether it's a Tokai, a Sauterne, and in this case, a Semillon?
I mean, even though there are distinct differences between how you make, any sort of nobly rotted wine effectively, whether you're making a paste, whether you're using fully botrytized grapes, you're taking botrytized grapes and you are extracting the flavors and the sweetness, and you are not allowing all of that sugar to turn into alcohol. I mean, it wouldn't do anyway. You're potentially aging it in oak, and then you're maturing it, maybe with a little bit of oxygen, maybe not, and then you've got some bottle maturation on the top. So that is going to be true for whether it's Tokai, whether it's Sauterne, whether it's a noble one from Riverina, or somewhere else. There's no harm in them putting in this sort of wine from elsewhere. So I don't necessarily think in the time that you've got, you can actually say, I can tell this has been made by a paste, like in Tokai versus in Sauterne or elsewhere. So I think that's the sort of thing that you agonize with when you've got 45 minutes to do a comparison question between those two wines in the theory exam. You've got 10, 15 minutes for this. So think more about in those bullet point important bits.
Yeah.
But if you did need to work out that it was from Sauterne would be 13.5/14, 14.5. This is 9. If you had a Tokai, even a Royal Tokai, I think is 10.5 or 11% alcohol. Some get up to a bit more than that. But 9%, you're only really looking at sweet wines from Austria or sweet wines from Germany at that point. Yeah, maybe that's why they wouldn't be massively keen on saying, how can you tell it's from Australia? Because I think that's too difficult. I don't think you can necessarily say there's a terroir element to this wine. You can work at the climate of this particular place. It's more about the winemaking.
It's the production. Yeah, absolutely. Nice finish.
One final point with the Noble One is that you tend to find it's in a slightly higher sweetness category than you'd find your Sauterne or your Tokai. So if you had them side by side ever, you see that this is a little bit sweeter. And makes sense when it's only 9% versus 14%. We've got more sugar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. William?
There we are. A really balanced set of wines. Italy, southern France, and then an easier Sauvignon Blanc, an easy SAT for the one, maybe a tough question they might ask, an easy SAT for well number 12 for the Sauvignier, but a very difficult conclusion to work out if it is Chenin or where is it from. So overall, I think really balanced. Well done, team.
Yeah, they've been great in selecting wines that you should know as a level 4 student, that you're not necessarily going to get the perfect note or the perfect answer, but you should have a fairly good grasp of those wines. None of them, in fact, I think pretty much all of them you study at level 3, so you're already getting used to them at level 3. Even if you're not tasting them a lot, you should be familiar with what to.
Yeah.
More baked, more Mediterranean flavors. Certainly the botrytis stuff there. So
yeah, there's no Dorello Mascalese in the Italy section. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's
that.
Time to wrap up. So I hope you found this useful. And I think we'll probably continue doing these. It's just good to spend some time and talk through it. But contact Erica or myself. Enjoy Discovering Wine or Global Wine Academy with any thoughts or issues, or you want to chat about anything diploma, and we'll be happy to chat to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers, Jim. That was fun.
Cheers.
See you.